Hey, hi there. How are you? Okay, so let me try to do my best to answer these questions the best that I can. Okay, first question. You wrote that the real problem of marketing seems not the arrival of LLMs, but the fact that over 20 years the industry has lived in a sort of parallel reality, ignoring. Yeah. So what basically happened is that the internet sort of became this I'll call it fake reality, and almost like a TV sort of reality. And the issue is that we behave because there was immediate, just very short answer to this, because there was immediate attribution, or we thought there was immediate attribution, or there was clear attribution. You could see they went to here, they went to there, they went to there, and then someone bought it. We started to think that you can sort of quantify activities. That's one thing. And then we also thought, well, now we can not sort of coerce and nudge the user in order to make those actions happen. And that happened at the same time as the web was maturing. So user expectations around what you saw on the web wasn't sort of the same thing that you would expect in reality to get. So imagine that someone came to your door and said, buy ultimate all-in-one, whatever tool that they were selling. That wouldn't work in a one-on-one relationship in reality, but it worked on the web because that's sort of what web content sort of became. And that was sort of the expectation of, okay, that's just what web content is. It's annoying. It's fine. It's like ad targeting. I don't like it. It's there, whatever. This is just reality of the web until it went too far, until it became too much, until a lot of things came into focus. And that paradigm started to slowly shift. And people started to look for things that were more conversational. And once people started to do that, which is when TikTok came along and when Google themselves had more firsthand experience on the results, that's when they use it. Enough. I want something real. I've been inundated. I'm savvier. I grew up with this. It's not like, okay, I'm the first generation of the internet. I knew nothing other than the internet. I know what's going on here. And the user became savvier and more aware, more mature, just as a natural evolution of how anyone would use, or any user base would use a platform. And that's how that happened. That's how that started to swing around. That's a whole podcast to chew on. You argue that truly that companies must first come to terms with the past. Yeah, so that's sort of thing that companies tend to do. Brands tend to ignore the reality of what they've done and how they've treated users, and more importantly, how they treat current customers. And they're like, all right, well, now let's just do X, Y, and Z instead. Let's switch strategies to make this very simple because it's a very complicated topic. Let's switch strategies. But your switching strategies today doesn't ignore what you did yesterday. And unless you take accountability for the fact that yesterday you were really being far more coercive, overselling, over energetic, over aggressive, over salesy, all these kind of tactics that were dominating the internet, unless you acknowledge that's what you were doing, you can't just switch and I'm just going to be a different person. It doesn't work like that. You have to and I've done this when I was at Wix. You have to reestablish the connection with the consumer base, with the audience. Acknowledge where you were, show that you're not doing that anymore in a real way. That's a whole strategy. How do you do that? That's a separate question. And then start doing the new thing. And over time, that compounds. But brands want immediate KPIs, immediate now. What we did yesterday is not working. Let's do this today. But that's the human memory doesn't work that way. Right Edge data shows despite rapid growth, AI is 1% overall. This seems to confirm your thesis that the gap between the dominant narrative, the reality of human behavior, in your opinion, why do marketers urgently pursue? Well, I mean, marketers are pursuing AI channels because they know it's becoming a popular thing. It's a new paradigm, and we don't know what it's going to become, and we don't know what it's going to turn into. But it seems very popular, and it seems very real. The issue is the merging of old mindsets and new mindsets. So nothing is actually in reality entirely new. There's always been a funnel. I go to Google, I look for something, I find a new pair of headphones. I go to YouTube, I then see review about it. I go to Amazon, I look at the product there, I see reviews there. I go check a different product. I go back to Google, see if I can find it cheaper on Google Shopping as opposed to Amazon. Now you just have LLMs in the mix. And I think what's happening is you still have the direct attribution mindset with a much less direct ecosystem, and people are having a hard time adjusting to that reality. NerdWallet would be a good example. They've lost a lot of the traffic. It's an affiliate model. It doesn't work the same way. And they've been throwing money at TV commercials for a long time. But those TV commercials and their actual content strategy on their website don't sync up. And I know it sounds crazy because they're a big company. They should know better. They know how to do this. They don't. Those two teams are not syncing up. Those two teams are not talking to each other. And there isn't a unified strategy. What's happened is, this is part of what the problem is that companies have been functioning in silos for a very long time. But that reality or that paradigm is really starting to cause real problems as you see things like less Google traffic and you need to build up other channels. So now everything needs to work a little bit more cohesively, but companies are still set up in a very siloed way and it doesn't work. My advice to you is, if you are a company, you need to figure out how to align everything together. In my opinion, is the real issue for brand choosing the right channel, understanding how to create authentic, lasting connection with the audience. It's connection with an audience. What you fundamentally want to do is to be able to resonate. And the only way you're able to resonate is, and these brands don't do this, is to first create a sense of self. Who are you? What do you do? Why do you do this? Why is it meaningful? What's the outcome? How is the benefit of this? Why do you want to do this? And who is this for then? If I am, I'm NerdWallet, because let's use NerdWallet. I'm about translating, which is what they are, but they never say this. We're about translating complex financial information and complex financial lingo into something translatable and transparent that you can understand and comprehend at eye level. That's what we're about. So would it make sense then for NerdWallet to go sponsor some like really fancy, Wall Street, whatever? No, that's not who that's not that message and that identity. That doesn't speak to Wall Street. It speaks to the average person. You have to figure out who you are first, because you can't figure out if you can't figure out who you are, you can't figure out who is for you. You can't figure out who your actual target audience is. And brands have that problem. They don't do the brand work, and they don't realize that not doing that identity work, which is what I focus on, ends up leading to you chasing all sorts of channels, all sorts of activities, all sorts of dollars spent on things that don't actually align with who your target audience actually is and who the people actually buying from you are. And in the end, it just costs you more money. So for example, with NerdWallet, the fact that they haven't aligned their brand with their TV commercials and their creatives and their actual website means, you can see this in Semrush data, they're just spending more on paid search as their organic search has gone down. So now every conversion they get costs them exponentially more money, and there's obviously less profit. So what I used to get for free now costs $10. If I'm earning $11, now there's only $1 profit margin. When you don't have the brand identity and the brand aligned, and therefore you're not able to resonate in the right way with the audience, then it doesn't matter what channel you're on. That channel is now going to be infinitely more expensive for you if you're able to perform at all. And what brands don't realize is, if you have actual connection, actual traction, your ability to perform whatever channel you want to focus becomes A, less expensive, and B, way more successful. And what company, well, we're earning $1 million. Yeah, but you don't see the $1 million you're not earning. You should be earning $2 million. In fact, you should be earning $3 million, because all the money you're spending, you probably don't need to spend it the same way in order to earn that money. And that's where people don't understand the idea of resonating, which again comes from brand identity. They don't understand the power of that on their actual performance. It does drive actual dollars, and it does prevent waste, a lot of waste. Okay, next one. We can distinguish between content designed to convert and content designed to build authority. Belongs to the old web, in your opinion. What are those comments marketers making, keeping them separate? It's all one song. When you're building up content as authority, whenever you're building up authority, that allows you to start selling. So if, for example, if you're listening to this, you're watching this, you're reading this, and I started selling my brand marketing services to you, I've already offered you value. I've already become a little bit of an authority, hopefully, on the topic. And now you're willing to hear me sell to you. Now you're willing to hear about my product or my service or whatever it is. So they're not separate things. They work together. It's the same reason why you go to a store, you see a brand that you know, your cereal. You see a brand that you know and a brand that you don't know, you go with the brand that you know because there's authority to it. They've offered you some kind of value, some kind of connection, and now you're going with that. I'm oversimplifying it, obviously. If you still have separate goals for separate teams and you haven't figured out how to, I mentioned before, how to unify that strategy, if you're still doing that same game and companies do this, they'll kind of pit teams against each other a little bit, or there's not one, and a telltale signal is when your leadership or the director of strat or whatever it is not syncing up with all of the teams and then owning the narrative. If it's things are still too separate. There isn't a brand vision. There isn't one large goal that everyone has to work for, and you're willing to sacrifice, when it makes sense, the immediate KPI for one team for the benefit of another team, which again, I'll give you NerdWallet with what's happening with them, is that their SEO team doesn't want to get the SEO content on their website. Their brand team is doing all sorts of, brand vibing on their social media or on TV commercials. They're both looking at, let's say, surface-like metrics, views, likes, shares, retweets, whatever, reposts on the social side, and traffic on the other side, or whatever it might be, the tracking on the SEO side. But they're not actually looking at, okay, what are the real KPIs? And if you're tracking those more surface KPIs, so that's the main thing that you're tracking, that's probably a problem. You have to understand the funnel. They might go to an LLM as part of the process. There's data that shows that they're not just stopping at the LLM, they're also going to Google. We've sort of created this conversation where it's one or the other, but it's not. And it's what I said before, the funnel has always been messy like this. For some reason, we think that it's not, or LLMs have changed the game. LLMs have added a more layer of complexity, or more layer of of it being a little bit more holistic. But as a fundamental process of what people are doing, I'm going to Amazon to look at a product, then I'm going to go to Google, then I'm going to go to Reddit. I'm not just going to one place. And I think that's always been a reality. LLMs bring that into focus. And you have to understand what happens before and after, as opposed to, well, they just won the ChatGPT, and that's not the full story. Which, if you're a marketer, you should always try to understand the full story as much as possible. Thanks so much. Take care. Bye.